It's time once again to talk about who the Detroit Lions could possibly bring in to help fix or improve the defense. We've had this conversation multiple times throughout the course of this season, and we're about to have it once more with some more names. So stay tuned, everybody. It's about to get interesting.
We used to be a team no one respected. We used to be a team no one feared. That was then. This is now.
First victory of the year on the line. Goff's got it. Back, looks, throws, end zone. Yes! Caught!
You know who we are.
10-5, end zone, touchdown Detroit Lions!
And you know where to find us. We won't be far. We'll be on your front porch waiting for you. We are the New Era Lions. And
we are driven by Detroit.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. I'm your host, David T. Pike, and as always, we're going to dive in. But before we dive in, I just want to say again, thank you all to those that are coming back to the show. Thank you all for your view, your support, your patronage. Thank you all for everything that you do. And to those that are tuning into my show for the very first time, I also want to give you a round of thanks. Thank you all for giving my show a shot. Thank you all for tuning in for the show as well. And also, I hope you enjoy the content, and I hope to gain your subscription as well. But to everybody, I just want to say God bless. I hope you all enjoy the show. I hope you all are having a good day. And let's get into the content. So here's the thing, folks. This is a conversation that we have had multiple times throughout the course of this season. And yes, we are about to have another video where we're going to be talking about potential players, potential available players that just became available that the Lions could potentially bring in to help improve, bolster, strengthen the defense. Now, I'm going to be entirely honest with y'all. Do I think, or does anyone realistically think that's going to watch this video think that the front office of the Detroit Lions, the management, Brad Holmes, whoever you'd like to put in there, is most likely going to listen to this, is most likely going to listen to the fans? Chances are highly unlikely. Let's just be fair and honest with ourselves. They're probably not going to listen. They probably are not going to care what we fans have to say about this. However, though, that does not mean that we as fans can't have this conversation and see, is it actually a good idea? Is there actually some merit to this? Or just have a healthy debate about this? Granted, make sure that it's respectable and also not letting it go completely off the rails. Now, here's what I'm going to say here. Who are we talking about today in this episode? Who do I think the Lions could, at least from what some fans are saying, could take the plunge on, could go all out for? Well, that's no other than these two guys that just got released by their respective former teams, the Raiders and the Colts, linebacker Shaquille Leonard and cornerback Marcus Peters. Now, here's why we're talking about them. Ever since the two teams that I just mentioned, the Colts and Raiders, cut these players, there's been an increased amount of chatter, a significant increased amount of chatter with Lions fans about going out and allowing Brad Holmes to go and get these guys, about making sure that Brad Holmes puts in an offer to sign them. Now, I'm going to say this right now. This usually happens with Lions fans. I'm going to be fair and honest. Anytime there is a player of some sort of significant prominence, anytime there's any sort of name recognition, anytime there's a player that is deemed that could potentially help out either the offense or the defense, particularly this year the defense, Lions fans are clamoring. They're jumping all over it. They want to see a big splash. They want to see a player brought in that they think could help the team. Now, the real question of the matter is, as we take a look at this, is this something that realistically makes sense? Is this something that is actually feasible? Something that Brad Holmes and the Lions could actually do? And that's what we're going to take a look at here in today's episode. We're going to see, is it something that makes sense? Is it something that's feasible for the Lions to potentially go and get Leonard, Peters, or hell, even potentially both? That would make really a lot of fans happy. So that's what we're going to talk about in this episode today. So, obviously, we're going to take a look at the players. So, the first thing we're going to take a look at is how each of these players has performed individually. And then we're going to kind of take a look at what it would realistically mean, how they would fit, contract-wise, so on and so forth. So, without further ado, let's take a look at the first player on this list, which is obviously Shaquille Leonard, the former linebacker of the Colts. If we take a look at what Leonard is, he's a 28-year-old linebacker. He was a captain of the former team that he was on with the Colts. In his current season that he had with the Colts before being released, he had 65 total tackles, didn't have any sacks or interceptions, had a really low missed tackle percentage rate of 8.7%. He had given up a 96.4 passer rating. So overall, not a pretty bad job as a linebacker. Pretty good tackling machine, doesn't miss tackles often. Not exactly the greatest in coverage, but not exactly terrible either. It's kind of like, whatever, average, okay. Now, Keep those numbers in mind. The one thing about Leonard that is kind of interesting to me is how he has no sacks this year. But at the same time, he didn't have any sacks last year or the year before that. However, though, if we go early in his career, he actually had quite a lot of sacks. In his rookie season, actually, he had 7 sacks registered. But like I said, for the last couple of years, he hasn't registered any sacks. So the first thing that comes to my mind is, has he dropped off in his production? Is there a change in scheme or something that's going on with the Colts? I don't know, but it's definitely a question that's popped into my head like, okay, how did this guy used to be a sack machine producer? Now he hasn't produced a sack in 3 years almost. So that's something that definitely caught my eye when I was taking a look at his production. The second thing that caught my eye is the fact that last year, Shaquille Leonard missed almost the entirety of the season due to a various amount of injuries. He had a concussion, he had back issues, he also had sustained a broken nose at one point. These are all things to also keep in consideration because when a player is coming back from injury, you have to ask yourself the question, are they going to be the same player? Are there going to be concerns? Are there any extenuating factors that we have to consider here? This then leads into the conversation topic, the conversation point of, okay, Leonard, for the most part, has been a pretty decent linebacker over the course of his career. So why in the thunder did the Colts release him? Why did they get rid of him? It's not like the Colts have been doing gangbusters this year. They could use every bit of talent or help that they could get too. They haven't been doing terrible, but they haven't been doing great. So why was he released? The answer is because Shaquille Leonard thought that he wasn't getting enough playing time because he thought that the Colts were not giving him playing time because they still thought that there was something wrong with his injury, even though he said that he was 100% fine. So because he was upset about his dwindling playing time, which is in essence the nutshell of what was going on there, he was released by the Colts. Now let me ask you this question. Now we're going to start getting into the logical aspect of, does this make sense for the Lions? Does that sound like a player that Dan Campbell's going to want to potentially deal with? Does that sound like a player that is going to bring their lunch pail to work, is going to do what is asked of them, not going to complain, and not going to have an issue or an attitude when something doesn't go their way? No, it definitely does not. Let's keep this in perspective, folks. Like I just said, Shaquille Leonard was a captain of the team. So why would you bring in a player that as a captain, a former leader of another team, is visibly complaining, is publicly complaining about the fact that he's not getting any playing time? Why would you bring him in? Because at that point, it's like, listen, leaders don't whine, they don't complain, they don't make a whole bunch of noise about something that's not going their way. They just do their jobs and they keep their head down. That to me does not fit the kind of cultural identity, that does not fit the kind of player that Dan Campbell is looking for. If you're going to be a leader, if you're going to be a player for Dan Campbell, complaining, whining, and crying about your situation is definitely not the way to do it. So that's one thing to consider. The second thing to consider is the money, is the contract, is what is it going to take to potentially bring Shaquille Leonard onto a football club. Now, let's understand something here. At the current moment, probably what's going to happen is a very short-term deal, something that's just going to be enough to get him onto the roster for whatever team he's going to sign. Probably a 1-year vet minimum deal, maybe a little bit more. But you have to think about it this way. Shaquille Leonard, like I said, is still 28 years old. He's going to be looking for a good contract. He's going to want a contract so that way he has long-term stability and security with whatever new ball club he goes to. Here's why this is a problem for the Lions. The last contract that Shaquille Leonard got from the Colts, he was almost making $20 million on average a year when he signed a 5-year, $98 million contract from the Colts. I'm just going to say this right now. While the Lions are supposed to have about $75 to $80 million in cap space next year, we have to think about this. Right now, how much money do the Lions really have on their cap space books? They have just a little under $3 million. If they were to sign Shaquille Leonard, that's really all they could do unless they started restructuring deals, cutting players, whatever the case have you. I don't think that Brad Holmes is going to make a move like that when he has to shuffle around all these other pieces just to bring in one player. That's my personal thoughts and opinion. Now, I'm not saying Shaquille Leonard is not a player without talent. He definitely has talent. But then you have to start asking yourself this question. Does it really make sense with our linebacking core? Kelvin Shepard said earlier in the year he has 4 starting linebackers between Anzalone, Derek Barnes, Jack Campbell, and Malcolm Rodriguez. Now, granted, we just found out yesterday, if I recall what it was, that Dan Campbell said that it's looking like Alex Anzalone is going to be down for a little bit due to his injury that he sustained on his left wrist or left hand. But are you really going to sign a player like Shaquille Leonard that's going to use the last bit of your cap space on just a small-term rental, unless you're willing to fully give him that $100+ million contract he's looking for? especially after you just signed Alex Anzalone to a 3-year, what was it, some 15, 20, whatever $million contract it was. That to me just doesn't make any sense, especially also when you just drafted a linebacker in the first round. So again, based upon all these different variations of reasons, I don't see why the Lions would go after Shaquille Leonard. They've got plenty of linebacking depth. They got another guy on practice squad. I think his name is Nowalski or whatever his name is. He did really good in college. There's just really not a whole lot of incentive for the Lions to go out and get Shaquille Leonard. So there's that one. Now we need to take a look at the other player, which is cornerback Marcus Peters, formerly of the Raiders. Let's take a look at what he had done with the Raiders prior to getting released. He had 43 total tackles. He had 1 interception. He had 1 interception that he returned for a touchdown. Surprisingly, that was the one against the Lions on Monday Night Football. However, though, that's about where the good things for him kind of end. If you go to PFF and you take a look at his stats on there, he allows a 70% reception rate for the wide receivers that he defends. He almost has a 22% missed tackle rate, so he can't tackle worth a thunder. Then you take a look at his passer rating that he gives up to wide receivers and quarterbacks, almost a 102 passer rating. That's crazy. So he allows a whole bunch of receptions, he can't tackle worth a damn, and he can't cover worth a damn. Case in point, on the year so far, out of 50 balls that have been thrown in his direction, he's allowed 35 receptions for 356 yards, 3 touchdowns, 10.2 an average a catch. Pretty much what I'm hearing here is a guy that can't do his job, and that was the reason why the Raiders cut him. Because you have to ask yourself, why was he released? Well, the reason why he was released was because his overall play on the season was largely disappointing and was not good, but at the same time, the last game he played against the Raiders, he was particularly awful. So it's like, listen, if the Raiders, a floundering franchise, is going to cut this player, why in the hell would we as the Lions go out and sign this dude? There's a couple of problems that I have with this. Other than the fact he hasn't played good this year, let's take a look at his age. He's 30 years old, folks. Most cornerbacks start really going downhill after they hit the big 3-0, and they really don't play very well much longer after that. Maybe another year or two. But like I just said, this year that he's played so far at 30 years old, he's looked particularly bad. So it's like, wait a minute here. Why would we sign another bad cornerback to a contract that's probably going to eat up the remaining bit of our cap space for a guy that's not really going to do us much of any good anyway? Because think about it. When he went to the Raiders this year, he signed a 1-year, $3 million contract. That's about, in essence, what the Lions have in cap space right now. But like I just said, we wouldn't even be getting him for a full year, and so far what we've seen on him from the full year that we've already kind of gotten, he's done particularly bad. So why would we sign a contract for a guy that has not played well with the Raiders, thinking that all of a sudden he's going to come to the Lions and all of a sudden everything's just going to click for him? That to me makes no sense. There's simply nothing about that contract. There's simply nothing about that situation that's worth it to the franchise. And again, there's no guarantee that if he comes to the Lions, all of a sudden he's just going to magically turn around and he's going to start playing better. So you have no incentive to sign Shaquille Leonard due to the fact you have all the talent and depth you have at linebacker. There's no incentive to sign freaking Marcus Peters because he's getting up there in years as far as a player is concerned, as far as a cornerback is concerned. And for the majority of the year this year, he's played like absolute crap. So it's like, why would you sign these players, waste what little cap space we have left just on rentals? Because that's in essence what it would come down to. They're rental pieces. I don't see Brad Holmes going to retain freaking, Marcus Peters long term, and I sure as hell don't see him retaining Shaquille Leonard long term. So to me, you're renting these guys for maybe a couple of games, get you into the playoffs, and then you're done with them. That just does not sound like the way that Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell does business. That's just not that's not their style. So for me, this whole ideology, this whole thought process of taking the plunge, going all out for these players is just ridiculous. It makes no sense. It goes against the entire ideology of what the Lions do. So that's my whole take for today. I'm kind of curious to see what some people have got to say on the matter. I'm sure some people are going to agree with me. I'm sure some people are going to disagree with me because they're going to want to say, David, you've got to make a move like this if you want to potentially get to the playoffs. Let's be reasonable, folks. We're 8-3. We had one really, really bad game against the Packers that's really sat bitter in our mouth. If we win against the Saints, most people are going to probably forget about it and just move the hell on. So are we really going to have a knee-jerk reaction going out for a player or players that really don't make any sense for this roster? I don't think so. I think Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell are smarter than that. I don't think they're going to I don't even think they're going to nibble a little bit, much less bite. But that's just my thought process on this. But I'd still like to hear what you guys' thoughts are respectfully. With that having been said, I just want to say thank you all for watching yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. If you like what you saw, by all means, I highly encourage y'all to watch the next episode that's coming at the end of this one. I'm also going to encourage y'all, please make sure you do one of these three things. Like, comment, and subscribe. Please make sure you do all those things. Again, comment respectfully. I also, again, want to encourage y'all, if you have subscribed in the past and you forgot to do so at the time, or you just subscribed and you've not had a chance to do so, again, please subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out, and I'm ever thankful for every subscription that I get. But I also want to encourage y'all, after you subscribe, make sure you also hit that bell notification icon as well, so that way you never miss any more content that I push out. Again, subscription numbers are always going up, but we want to make sure we also get you guys turning the notification icon on, so that way as soon as I push something out, you're always in the know-how and you can get right back in immediately. I also want to encourage y'all, please, to share this content with your Lions friends and family members. Share it here on YouTube, share it on Twitter, share it on Facebook, share anywhere and everywhere you can with everybody and anybody you can. So that way we can continue to get the word out. We can continue to grow the channel. I'm ever so thankful for all the help that I receive from my loyal fans. And with that being said, I just want to say again, thank you all for tuning into the show. Thank you all for your view, your support, your patronage. If I hadn't gained your subscription and I just did, I want to say welcome to the family. Thank you all for your trust and faithfulness in me. And if I did not earn your subscription yet, hopefully you'll come back and I'll get another chance to do so. But until that next time, I just want to again say God bless. Hope you all enjoyed the show. And until the next time we meet, I'll see you all in the next episode.